Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Neil McDevitt,
Executive Director.
Executive Director for the Deaf Hearing Communication Center. We want to first welcome all of our participants today. If you see me looking at the screen to my right, I have to let people in from the waiting room. So please forgive me if I seem to be more distracted than typically. Today we have about 50 people that have registered. We have about 45 people here with us. And this might be the largest category of interpreters in the state of Pennsylvania outside of an RID convention. And so we're very grateful for everybody for joining us here today. We're joined today by two wonderful people from the state of Pennsylvania. One has been elected and one has been appointed. Our elected representative is Joe Hohenstein, and he is the Pennsylvania State Representative for the 177th District. Which represents part of the city of Philadelphia. And also, he is also very aware of the field of interpreting, as his wife, his spouse, is also an ASL interpreter. We feel very fortunate to have this opportunity to work with Joe and bring this program together today. We're also honored to have Susan Dickinson joining us today. She is the director of the State Office of Unemployment Compensation and very closely works with different policies. Representative Hohenstein was very integral in bringing her to this group today. Before we get too far into the program, I want to just remind people of how we're going to run this technology today. We have tried to make sure that the person speaking and also that the interpreters are visually and auditorily accessible. If you have your screen on gallery mode, by doing that, we need to make sure that people keep their video screens off. And so that means that I'll probably need to turn off people's videos myself. And if you have any questions or comments, please use the chat feature down at the bottom. And then that way, we could try to answer questions as we go along. We also have several deaf individuals that'll be joining in the group. And so if you'd like to ask a question in your preferred language, let us know. And we'll make sure that you're given your chance. You'll bring up your video screen and you can ask your question as well. And so many of you might not have experienced this kind of Zoom meeting in the past. It does require a little bit more active involvement, especially on my part as the technical director of this meeting. And sometimes I have to be, how do I put this, a little bit of a dictatorial in order to make sure that it goes smoothly. At the same time, our agenda for today is really Representative Hohenstein will make some remarks, and then Susan will also share some of her perspective. And we've already gotten so many questions from your colleagues who were not able to attend this session today. And I have the feeling that many of those questions are similar to what you might ask as well. And so I've already shared some of those questions with Representative Hohenstein and also Mrs. Dickinson. And so hopefully they'll be able to answer those questions as we go along. I think it's a wonderful opportunity once again, and I want to thank everybody for attending. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Representative Hohenstein.
Thank you, Neil. I just wanted to say thank you to Neil and to DHCC for pressing to have this, because one of the, and this is going to be something that I'm hoping we're going to be able to use, not just for interpreters, but for other folks in the gig economy or other people who often work as independent contractors. But I thought it was important, especially when Neil approached me, to make sure that this is something that we deal with specifically for interpreters as well. So we do have all the different questions, and we're going to be trying to get to those in a little bit. The first thing I want to do, though, is give a little bit of a background of what the unemployment system is in Pennsylvania and what they've been doing, especially since the beginning of the pandemic. If we look at the number of cases that the Pennsylvania Unemployment Commission is working on or has processed, those are in the millions. I don't know if it's gotten over 2.5 or 3 million yet. Susan might be able to correct me on the exact number, but that office saw more claims in the time period from the middle of March into the middle of May, even just in 2 months, than it normally sees in an entire year. And that is just the traditional unemployment system. So the way that unemployment works is, if you have paid into it, and normally you do pay into it through W-2 employment with a direct employer. So that's the traditional unemployment system. And then you would get a benefit if you lose work and are eligible based on essentially the amount of work that you had in the previous, I believe, 4 or 5 quarters. So it goes back just a little over a year. That's the standard system, and the way that has functioned in the current pandemic is those applications are open and can be filed online, and then they're being processed, but they are significantly behind, and we'll get to exactly why that's happening in a little bit. There are also some other programs, one of which is directly connected to unemployment, and that is a federal program that provides an additional $600 a week for certain qualifying people in order to essentially just alleviate the even more drastic economic impact that loss of income has been having. That program is in its winding down stage, but we may see a recurrence of it depending on what happens with federal legislation. And then finally, we also have what is known as and what's really of interest to most of the folks here, and that is PUA, P-U-A, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. And this is a federally funded program that's administered by the state. And the state was, and so that's the one that most of you have applied for, or most people need to have applied for if they get the predominant source of their income through independent contracting. So with all of this, when the pandemic hit, unemployment was just getting ready to implement a new system for processing claims. They had to implement that system in the middle of the drastic increase in normal claims. On top of that, they've also had to build additional systems, and in particular the PUA system, while it is running. And the analogy that we use is that they are building the airplane at the same time that they're flying it. So how it ever got off the ground, we're not even sure, but it is off the ground. So the Unemployment Commission has assigned folks from other departments, and so they've begun to increase staff. Some of the people needed additional training. It is my understanding that they're close to what they would consider a reasonably full staffing level now, but they're still significantly behind because of the buildup and the backlog. And just in terms of introducing Susan into this conversation, Susan and most of the other folks who are working in the Unemployment Commission are working long hours, effectively almost double time or double shifts every day, because they are so short-staffed. So I know in my office and my main constituent services advisor, Tara Gontek, is on the phone, on the call today. She and my other constituent service reps, about 85% of their work in the past 2 months, 3 months has been unemployment claims. So we try to work with you, and the way that my office works, and I gave you my email, and I'm going to encourage Tara to also give you her email. We will take an inquiry from you, and email works the best to get our attention quickly enough to get it moving. We will get back to you, get some additional information, and then submit a backlog request or an expedite request to the unemployment compensation. That still means that there could be another week or two wait even, and in some situations longer depending upon the complexity of the issue. But we are able to get some attention paid that is you are not able to get through the traditional system. And that's what we try to do and provide. And then we are also ready to follow up in regular ways with the Unemployment Commission office in order to make sure that they're paying attention to the cases that we presented to them. And so that's how my office is working in this pandemic and with unemployment. And at this point, what I'm going to do is hand it over to Susan so she can discuss some of the more specific details of the program, and also begin to get into the answers to the questions that you all have presented in writing ahead of time, and then we'll get to additional questions after.
There we go. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining today, and thank you for having me. I'll share some general information first about the unemployment system and where we've come in the last 4 months, and then we'll get to your questions. That's always the best part of any town hall. So first, I want to thank the representative for inviting me here and putting this together. We've had several town halls with various individual groups, and every group has their own special thing that they need to know about our programs or a certain theme. And I saw some of your questions ahead of time, so I kind of know that you are more interested in the PUA program, and you have a lot of questions around returning to work, and how you have to return to work, and if you can refuse work. So I'll make sure to address those today, but if I don't, certainly raise an issue and I'll address it for you. So we have, since the middle of March, come pretty far. All telling for all of our unemployment programs, we've paid $24 billion. We've never in our history paid anywhere near $24 billion. $3 billion of that is from the PUA program specifically. So we started off with about 600 staff. Our regular claims load was about 10,000, 12,000 claims a week. And that's what 600 staff can handle. And then all of a sudden, within 3 weeks, we had, over 1 million claims. And so we have been adding staff. We've essentially doubled the staff that we have. That's through a mix of individuals from other departments. It was very heartwarming when the pandemic started, when we had other departments reach out to us and say, hey, our function, whatever we do, isn't needed right now. Can we help you instead? And so we've had the Department of Revenue answering our PUA phone calls. We've had also the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency answering PUA phone calls as well, and they're starting to learn how to handle emails and more complicated things. We have our Unemployment Tax Bureau. Normally, they don't have anything to do with benefits. They're just on the employer tax side, but they have also been running our PUA program since they are at least familiar with unemployment compensation, unlike Department of Revenue or FIA. So we've had, other individuals who used to work for unemployment, who've gone to completely different agencies. We're borrowing them back, people who've left for, PennDOT or the Department of Health. They're all chipping in, some of them, during the day if they can, or on overtime after they're done with their regular job. We also have about 150 retirees, annuitants who have retired at some point. We had no limit. If they retired 15 years ago, we'd take them. So it doesn't matter how long it has been. We're happy to have any help we can, especially someone who understands the unemployment process. My own mother is one of the annuitants. She's 76 years old and is at home releasing payments. So anyway, we had a lot of support, and then have also brought on additional real new staff. So not just borrowed individuals, but individuals who are actually hiring. So far we've brought on about 200 new individuals, and we have another wave of hiring coming up soon. So we'll have more come on all the time. The key with us to hiring, it's a very difficult job. Unemployment compensation is complicated in two ways. First of all, the law and policies surrounding it, simply understanding unemployment and understanding eligibility. But also our current system is very difficult to use. It's a 40-plus-year-old legacy system, and it's kind of Frankensteined together. It's not all one system. It's a whole bunch of systems, all not even really working with each other that well, and you have to know where to look to find certain things. So it's difficult, and individuals who we hire, a lot of them take themselves out of training and decline after a while because it is very difficult to learn. So it's in our best interest to keep hiring because we always do have to replace individuals who leave as well. It is a tough job, and we can't be happier that our staff have responded the way they have. Since the middle of March, they've worked over 190,000 hours of overtime, which is a lot of overtime. That's a lot of evenings and weekends, not hanging out with your family in quarantine. So anyway, I'll move on from there. I did want to add, we are adding an additional 200 contract staff from contract call centers coming up soon. I think they're in training right now, actually. And so we'll have more individuals answering the PUA phone. These are companies that have done PUA contract work in other states, so it's not brand new to them. It's just in Pennsylvania as opposed to the other states. So when the CARES Act program started, about 2 weeks after the pandemic started, it was very unprecedented. I was here 10 years ago working on these programs during the Great Recession. And at the time we thought that nothing could be that crazy. But now I see how easy it was compared to what we're dealing with now, especially with all the programs starting at the exact same time. 10 years ago, we had different programs, different tiers, but there was always a gap in between so we could get them set up, get staff trained. make sure the public had all the information and move on. And this time it was just everything all at once. We use our legacy system for most programs, but we did have to contract with an outside company for the PUA system. The program was unlike any program we've had. It's a combination of our disaster assistance program and our regular UC program, and there's just some rules in it that the US Department of Labor added, which are unlike anything we've had. So the company that we're using for our new system, which we're going live with in October, that's just our regular unemployment system. They are the ones where we bought this additional PUA system. So it's an off-the-shelf product, which means we plugged it in and turned it on. There's no designing it, there's no building it, it's just out of the box. So we are learning it as well, and there are a lot of things we don't like about it, and we work with the vendor as much as we can to improve those things. Not just, there's some things that really don't meet our law that we have to change to meet Pennsylvania law. But of course, there's a lot of customer service things, which I know you have encountered if you've used the system, which just make it not user-friendly. So we continue to work with them on trying to make that a better product. We do have more staff, back to staffing, we do have more regular UC staff being trained in PUA. When the PUA program started and we got this new system, we had to use all of our helpers that I described earlier. We didn't have the capacity to have any of our regular UC staff, help with this program. So anyone who offered us additional help, those are the individuals who we quickly, explained PUA, trained in PUA. Actually, our unemployment tax staff really took the lead in figuring out this new system and figuring out how it works and putting together manuals for other staff. And they have done a great job and have been leaders in making this happen. So now that we have materials and we are able to train other staff and get them access, the 600 regular staff will be learning the PUA system. And this means that we will also finally have someone available on our video phone calls on Wednesdays and Fridays when we have the video phone available. Currently, we do not have anyone who can answer PUA questions, but that will change soon. I don't know the exact time frame, but we know that we need someone there who can, who knows the system and can speak to what might be happening on individuals' claims. So that should be happening hopefully within the coming weeks. It is a tricky system to learn, so we want to make sure the individual who's going to be doing that from our Harrisburg office kind of knows it inside and out and gets used to that before they can answer some questions. And finally, the last thing I will mention is I know that there is a lot of consternation across the board, actually, throughout the state on returning to work. Now that counties are reopening and places are going back, in what situations do you have to accept work? Can you turn down work if the situation seems unsafe? This is the most frequent question we're getting now. So pretty much what it comes down to is refusing any type of job comes down to if you have good cause. And that is an abstract concept, but it's really based on the individual circumstances. So our federal guidance tells us that if someone has a real reason why they feel they can't attend a job site, and it has to be something like, for example, their employer is not following the rules that are set forth for safety, or the person has someone in their household who's immunocompromised and they really should not be leaving the house. It really is a very case-by-case basis. The only example that the federal government gave us as to someone who may still have to report to work and may have benefits cut off is if there's really no reason other than than simple fear and worry about catching the virus. But if the employer is doing everything they should be doing, and everything is safe, and there's no immunocompromise in the house, everything is very, very plain vanilla, that might be the only reason why someone may have benefits cut off. If there are real reasons, as I said, like the employer's not following, mask wearing and not following the things that they need to do, and there's proof of that. And by proof, I mean individuals must try to resolve the issue with the employer. So if you're offered a job or a gig, and you find out about it, and they were to say something like, "Oh, we're not enforcing the rules," or "We don't worry if you do that or don't do that. We're very loose here." That could be a reason to question them and say, "Oh, I don't know about that. Can we come up with some other better answer?" And if they say no, that could be a good reason to refuse a job. So it is very, very case by case. Everyone's situation is different. Their living situation is different. It's not something that we can answer up front and say, yes, you will be eligible, or no, you won't be eligible. We just have to take it on a case-by-case basis as these are reported to us. And, in a lot of cases, because of the current situation with the pandemic, it's very likely that, there are a lot of issues out there as employers are themselves trying to navigate this and figure out what's the safest and best way to proceed with reopening. It's the learning experience for everyone involved. It's certainly an unfortunate time, but it's opened our eyes to a lot of different things, and trying to work together and making sure that places are safe enough to return to. So with that was all I was going to share today. So we can move on to the questions if we're ready.
Let me just real quickly interject with a couple different points. When unemployment is updating anything, you can always go to my website or go to my Facebook page. We regularly post when changes are made, and we try to put that information out in a digestible way, and in a way that you can understand. And also, if you have specific feedback, specific issues that have come up, either positive or negative, with your experiences, if you feel like sharing them with us, we have a mechanism to have direct contact. We're in fairly regular contact as legislators with the agency to give them feedback on their systems. And as Susan said, they're developing a lot of this work right now. So things like how the interfaces work, how the application systems work, are things that they're interested in knowing how to do better, because they're in the middle of, like I said, building the plane in the middle of flying. So just know that you can, I want to be able to offer my office as a space where you can bring some of those to, because I know that with the load that unemployment has on the regular claims systems and the PUA systems, their ability to have a degree of responsiveness is limited at this point. So we can serve to help with some of that. So I guess we should just get to the questions at this point, right? Does that sound like it makes sense?
I'm ready for them.
Okay, so I'm going to kick it off. If somebody, just make sure you close the screen so we have a full screen here so people can follow this. Okay, thank you, Joe. Just disable your screen for a second so that everybody can see me. Susan, your last point, you talked about if somebody refuses to take an assignment or to work. That's probably the most common question that we're getting right now. And one of the challenges with the interpreting profession is oftentimes the interpreter has no clue what's going on until the full offer comes in. And so in other words, they might see the request and it might say, you know, go to this area in somewhere in Philadelphia, and you're working from 10 to 12. And they don't know until later that it's actually in a, you know, coronavirus ward at the University of Pennsylvania Hospital, for example. And it really becomes problematic for a lot of interpreters. And the other reasons are quite simple. You know, maybe you've already accepted work somewhere else. Many times, many interpreters work for multiple agencies. And so that they're receiving requests and offers, and some of which they might need to turn down. And what's happening is, because they're turning it down, it causes delays with their unemployment compensation and their PUA issues as well. And so how can interpreters work through that?
So there's actually two different concepts that I'll explain. There's the refusal of suitable work concept, which is most of what we're talking about here. But then there's also missed work. And I realize those sound similar. So I'll do my best to try to explain the differences. So refusal of suitable work is a part of the Pennsylvania unemployment law that, you know, says if someone refuses a suitable job, they could be ineligible for unemployment benefits. So it is a little different with gig workers, because you're not really accepting a job that's long lasting. It's a one at a time type of job. But the refusal of suitable work kind of speaks to that, where it's going to be a longer term type of position. So where this comes in, if you have refused a job, the only way we're going to know about it is if the person who offered it to you actually contacts us and tells us. And it sounds like in gig work that doesn't really happen because they're not really an employer. So the situation where you're turning down gig type work is probably more, it sounds like it's more related to missed hours. So there's a separate section of the unemployment law which says if you turn down work and it's considered missed hours, for other individuals, this would be if you work for an employer, they give you a shift and you turn down the shift. So it's not really refusing a whole job, it's just refusing certain hours. Then individuals must report to us the value of those hours. So whether that was an hourly job and how much work you missed, or you know, if it's a stipend, you know, I'm not sure how it works, but what you would do is report that amount to us, and we deduct that from, it's treated the same as earnings. So there's earnings that you had during the week and there's missed earnings, but they're treated the same way, they're calculated the same way. So if you had earnings and missed earnings, we add them together and we subtract them from your combination rate, which is how we find out what we pay you for the week. So the difference, it's complicated. I hope I'm explaining this okay. So the difference when it comes to refusal of suitable work, that could lead to a denial that lasts for weeks until you purge that denial, which denials are purged by earning 6 times your weekly benefit amount. So you would be ineligible for quite a while. Whereas missed hours, I guess you could think of it as kind of a denial, but it's not really. It's certainly going to reduce the amount you receive, but it's not really a denial of benefits. You're still eligible for benefits if your earnings don't exceed the allowable amount. So, you know, you could proceed that way by, if you refuse certain gigs, by just providing the amount that you would have made for that gig and providing that as earnings, and then your eligibility isn't interrupted. It proceeds, you may not receive full payment for the week. And I'll make a quick point about how we calculate partial earnings. If you look at your financial determination, and so this could be on regular UC, or this could be on PUA. It's the same no matter which program it is. If you look at your financial determination, it shows your weekly benefit amount. And so there's a second term on there called partial benefit credit. It probably says PBC, or it might say partial benefit credit. That's 30% of your weekly benefit amount. So in the unemployment law, what we do is we add those two numbers together, the weekly benefit amount and partial benefit credit, and that constitutes your combination rate. So when someone reports earnings to us, the calculation is to subtract the earnings from the combination rate, and then we pay the difference. So I realize that's a lot of information. That's actually all on our website. If you wanted to check it out, you know, at some time after this call, our website, www.uc.pa.gov. And it explains generally financial eligibility, partial earnings. There's a section where we have frequently asked questions for claimants, and you can look in there and it explains everything that I kind of just went over. So yeah, it does get a bit complicated. We try to make it as easy as possible, but with a complex unemployment law, it does get difficult sometimes. So I hope that kind of paints the picture between refusing work and just missing hours. And of course, as independent contractors, when you report your earnings to us, unlike regular employees, you report net earnings. So you would not do gross. Regular employees, or even if you did regular, like a part-time job type of a thing, you would report gross earnings for that. But any type of self-employment, you would report net earnings. So you would, you know, the amount that you get paid minus your expenses that would have gone into that gig, that would be the amount that you report to us.
So this is kind of related. I'm not familiar with the process and the nitty-gritty of filling out those types of forms. So when you're talking about refusal to work versus missed hours, can you explain a little bit about how that kind of works in the weekly filing that people need to do? Because I think that that's what's causing a lot of problems. In our industry, interpreters regularly turn down requests because they're not a match or they're not qualified for that particular job. There are a host of reasons like that. And it seems like what you're saying is that's more missed hours rather than refusal to work. So then how would somebody actually fill that out so they don't accidentally misclassify that?
So in the weekly certifications or biweekly certifications, if you're on regular UC, it's biweekly, there are questions there that ask about your earnings. And it will say on regular UC, for example, it says, did you work? And we have a little explanation there that it says, you know, if you worked or if you could have worked and missed hours, you want to say yes. And that's because simply our system will not give you an earnings box unless you say yes to that answer. So you say yes, even if you missed work, and then a couple pages later, it'll say insert your earnings, and that's where you can insert your earnings. It actually does not ask you about refusing work. The only way we know about someone refusing a job is if the employer tells us that a person refused the job. So on the PUA program, it's the same thing. You know, there is something there that does ask about refusing a job, and that's one of the things we are looking to enhance. We want to, if not change the wording, put a little explanation there about what that is and how that differs from turning down hours. So there is some place, and I have to admit I don't know it off the top of my head what exactly it says, but there is a place in PUA to insert earnings. It asks if you worked, and you can put in the amount of your net earnings. That's another box where we're putting more information to explain gross earnings versus net earnings. So that is where you could put any earnings from a job where you missed hours because you refused a gig. Now, I would not consider something that was completely it was something you really couldn't, like, let's say you're on one end of Pennsylvania and someone offers you a gig 6 hours away. I mean, I wouldn't even consider that missed earnings. That's just something that's not feasible to have taken in the first place. So missed earnings is for anything that you feasibly could have and would have taken, except for, you know, perhaps you do have coronavirus concerns. Perhaps you had, you know, some other a personal engagement you had to go to and you had to turn it down, you know, those types of things. If you had other work, that's not really something that you could have controlled. It really comes down to, you know, what could you have controlled? So if you were already working for those hours, clearly you could not have taken a second job at the same exact time. So those would not be missed hours. You were already working for those hours. It's any time that you had missed hours where you turned it down of your own volition for some personal reason. That's where the unemployment law wants to see that reported as earnings. And I don't think our website goes into great detail about that. That is probably something we should look at as well. In addition to actually changing the applications to explain that, we should put more information on our regular website, and we'll try to update that to make sure that's a little more clear to individuals about what it is the law is looking for in that respect.
Thank you for that, Susan. I think that that's really helpful with a lot of the common questions that we've been getting. One particular question that we've also received, many questions in this regard, is that we all know what's happening out there. You know, in our country, people are now reopening, and my son was at the beach yesterday, and he said there was almost nobody wearing masks. And so there's a lot of fear that this is going to last, you know, past the PUA deadline of July 25th, where that program is supposed to twilight. And so can you talk a little bit about that? I know you mentioned that earlier, that it's a federal program, and they're not like really fully in your jurisdiction per se, but your sense of how this will be handled, you know, as this comes up and goes on.
I can actually speak to that, I think, maybe a little bit better, Neil, because the fix on that is going to be legislative, and it's probably going to be federal legislation, although it could conceivably be something we pass in the state. We just don't really have the funding, I think, without getting some support from the federal government to be able to extend it. I do know that one of the other programs that was set to expire after 13 weeks, and Susan might be able to fill me in because I forget which one it was, but there has already been an extension of some of the pandemic relief programs into additional weeks as well. So we would be pushing to do that. And I believe there is some legislation pending right now in Washington that would do some of that, but it hasn't yet been passed. So that would really be where the solution lies. If the deadline of the 25th is the actual real deadline, then then we're going to have to be working on how to help people, and we may be getting other types of requests other than unemployment requests, but finding ways to get people additional support is going to be key. One of the other things that is also being talked about, and I think was one of the questions, was what to do with some of the additional relief efforts, like the pandemic checks, or some people are calling them stimulus checks. And there may be another round of those coming. That is all coming from the federal government. There was a little bit of a movement to try to do that within the state. I don't think that's going to get anywhere in the legislature right now. We just don't have the funding at the state level to be able to handle that. So that's really where we are right now. And again, we'll be updating that as those changes are made, so people can keep update on that.
And I can quickly go over the ending dates of the various programs just to make sure everyone is aware. So for the PEUC program, which is an additional 13-week extension of regular unemployment, it is limited to 13 weeks for individuals, but the program does run till the end of December. So people can still qualify if they're currently on regular UC right now. They will eventually exhaust this year. They will be set up with their additional 13 weeks. After those 13 weeks are over, the shared state and federal extended benefits program has triggered on. And that's an additional 9 to 13 weeks. It depends on the length of someone's regular UC claim. It'll be half of those weeks. So for regular UC, people can qualify from 18 to 26 weeks. So whatever they qualified for, it will be half that amount. And that program will continue until the insured unemployment rate drops below a certain level. Our statisticians tell me that right now they're projecting that to continue through April of next year. So we may have this program with us for quite a while. It depends on circumstances. So with the PUA program, that also lasts through the end of December. So your PUA entitlement is 39 weeks. So if you run out of those 39 weeks before the end of December, that will be your maximum benefit entitlement. But otherwise, individuals do have until the end of December. I believe it's December 26th is the final payable week of the PUA program. And finally, the FPUC program, which is the additional $600 on top of regular payments, that's the one that ends July 25th. So you'll still continue to receive your regular PUA payment past that date. It's just the additional $600 stops on all the programs with the week ending July 25th.
Okay, just a quick heads up for people on the call. We're supposed to stay here until about 12:20. So we're going to try to answer as many of your questions as we can in that time frame. One more very common question that we've touched on is, I'm trying to think how best to put it, how to contact people at UC and how to contact different elements of unemployment and payments. You've already mentioned the sheer volume of work that the office has and how that has changed since mid-March. One of the most common questions really is, I've called, I've emailed, I've done the web chats, I've reached out to my representative, I've done everything that I'm supposed to do and exhausted every avenue that I have. What's left for me to do? Is there a better way to reach someone? Is there a better process to be followed? Is there a better way to do this, essentially, in order to get somebody?
Sure. So there are the multiple ways to contact us, and as you can imagine, all of them are jammed right now. But we are getting the additional help all the time, which should make things a little better. Already we've seen, for example, with our regular call queue, back at the beginning of the pandemic, we had about 75,000 unique callers every day. Now we're down to 35,000 unique callers every day, which is still more than we can handle, but we are, you know, at least half of what we were, so things are getting better. And if you do try to call us any day, whether it be the regular UC line or the PUA line, later in the week is always less busy than earlier in the week. I know, for example, with those numbers I just gave, if we have 35,000 unique callers on a Monday, it'll be half that on a Friday. So usually our call volume drops if that's the way, you know, someone wants to get in touch with us. The chat feature, right now, the regular UC staff are the ones using chat. So the PUA answers can't be given via chat right now because the staff aren't trained, but they will be soon. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, we're getting more people trained all the time so that they can help with PUA as well. As I mentioned, PUA staff right now are the helpers. They're not our usual regular UC staff, but we're fully aware that someday they're going to have to go back to their regular jobs. So we're getting the regular staff rolled on so that they are able to answer those questions and handle those claims too. So there will be more help coming in that respect. Chat especially is a great way. A lot of people are very happy that they can reach us. We've only had chat for probably not even a year yet. Prior to that, you had to call or email and that was it. So, you know, it's difficult sometimes to get into the chat queue. It's just like the call queue where it's busier earlier in the week and less busy at the end of the week. It is open to longer hours though. It's open 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And if you do get in the chat queue, it's only a 5-minute wait. It maxes out at 5 minutes. So you won't be waiting for an hour like you would on the phone. So that is kind of a nice option if you can get in there. And finally, email. Email, it's good and it's bad. I like email because it gets your place in line. So at the very least, I tell people to send one email about your issue. And then if you want to try to get a hold of us via chat or phone, you continue doing that, but at least that email is there. And if you aren't able to get hold of us another way, eventually someone will get to your email and you know, be able to answer you. So there is the PUA email and the regular UC email. And of course they are overwhelmed. So it's taking for regular UC about 2 or 3 weeks for a response. Our website shows longer than that, but that's really the worst case scenario we put on our website. We don't really put an average. So, you know, it will take a couple weeks. We have some individuals looking at new emails as they come in. So it's not, you know, they can take the low hanging fruit. And if it's really simple, easy things, they can get back to people right away, sometimes same day. It's the more complicated things that kind of sit there in the email. We have a lot of duplicates, and fortunately we had some IT help, and they've put together a little program for us where if someone's emailed us, you know, 20 times over the last few months, it now clusters them all into one email and we only have to respond one time. So that is helping our efficiency, and we are able to get some more emails now in the past 2 weeks or so, and that's working out well. We're now having IT help us do the same with the PUA account. That account has a ton of emails in it and the staff is smaller, so it is harder to get to the PUA emails. But as I mentioned, if anything, just sending one email gets your place in line. And that way, when someone gets to it, you know, if you haven't been able to reach someone by that time, they can, you know, they'll handle it at that point. If you happen to get through to us via a phone call or chat, the staff are supposed to actually then be looking in the email account to see if people have already also emailed us, so that they can then close that out. They know that they don't have to email someone back. They've gotten a hold of them via phone or chat. So it's been a very learning experience for us with communications and all the possible tools. You know, we try to improve it all the time. It is difficult. It's just a lot of high volume. With the emails right now, we have in the regular UC account 450,000 emails. but when you take the duplicates out, it's a little over 100,000. So that's still a lot, but it does help a lot. So we're getting through those as best as possible. I would say right now, the PUA answers are just harder to get simply because it's a smaller staff, and we're working on getting people added to that staff. I've also had some individuals say to me that they've tried contacting us via the PUA dashboard, but that actually doesn't go anywhere right now. That software is not really hooked up. So if for example, you upload documents to the dashboard for us to see, we're not going to know they're there unless you separately send us an email to the PUA account. So that's one thing that we're also clarifying on our website, so that, you know, if individuals want, for example, a higher weekly benefit rate and they found the proof of those wages and they upload them for us, we're not going to know you uploaded it unless you email us separately. So we're working on our messaging for that as well.
I have a few more questions from our previous submission. And there are also some more that are coming up in the chat box that are similar. One group of questions that we've seen pertains to status. So for example, one person said that they just filed for PUA, and I know you handled that part, but other people have said similar things. For example, we've filed and then are told that our case is being set aside, or there's an issue with the filing. And one of the problems that they're seeing as well is they're being told, don't call us, we'll call you. So could you talk a little bit about the differences in status, whether they're set aside, they're completed, and how can people who are on a different status level resolve those issues?
Sure. For the PUA system, it's a little different because there's that dashboard, which is helpful. You can see what's happening on your claim, but at the same time, the codes and the issues there might not make a lot of sense. So we are working on a guide right now to explain, if you have such and such issue on your dashboard, this is what it means and this is what you have to do. In most cases, the issue was raised by something that you said on your application. You answered something a certain way. So in most cases, you know, there isn't anything we would need from you up front, but your case just needs to go to an examiner who's probably going to reach out to you and ask you more questions about it. I'll give the example of, there's a question on there, and it's required that we ask everyone, again, a federal requirement because it's a federal program, that we certify every week that you are still unemployed due to the disaster. And you know, the disaster in this case being the pandemic. So we have a question on there that says, are you unemployed due to the disaster? And we have had thousands and thousands and thousands of people answer no. And that's a problem, because if you're not unemployed due to the disaster, you're not eligible for the program. But what we were finding as we called individuals was that they really just didn't understand the question. A lot of people, for example, didn't see themselves as unemployed because they're self-employed, and they thought that unemployed meant being attached to an employer and you're not attached to the employer anymore. And that's not it at all. We're looking to see, is the reason you're not working some other reason besides the disaster? Because if it is, then you're not eligible anymore. So once we called dozens of people, and not a single one of them was a correct hit. They were all false positives. We went ahead and had our vendor just release payments to everyone. So that can happen, you know, if it's some issue that everybody is doing incorrectly. When we see those patterns, we may address them across the board. Now, more likely, there's a lot of people who are answering questions which are creating issues that are just on their specific claim. It's not really a rampant thing, but it's something that now you've raised an eligibility issue. We have to reach out to you and find out what's going on. You know, I think it'll help once we get the issues list out on our website to explain what they are, why you have this issue, you know, what's going on, that might help individuals a lot. There's also an issue that goes on to dashboards for identity verification. We have had a lot of fraud in this program, not just Pennsylvania, but every state is experiencing this with their PUA program. Fraud is rampant, and it's really hard for us. There's no way for us to tell who the real claimants are and who the fraudulent claims are. So there's a lot of identity verification that may have to happen. So there's an issue that goes on to people's claims, but the vendor doesn't display that issue to individuals as it does with the rest of the issues. So we have to have them fix that and display the issue so that you know it's there and that you can send us your identity. We need 2 forms of identification if that's the issue so we can release your payments. Because right now, an individual who is caught in that identity problem wouldn't know it because it's hidden. And I understand where the vendor is coming from. If you show the fraudsters that there's an identity issue, that's going to tip them off. But you know, we're just going to have to do that because individuals who aren't affected and who are just innocent bystanders need to be able to clear that identity issue. So that could be, if you have some sort of problem with your payments and it looks like there are no outstanding issues, there's a chance you might be in the identity issue bucket. So we're looking to have them fix that fairly quickly. You know, it's our idea of quick is not their idea of quick, but we keep pushing as much as possible so that if that's affecting someone, they can clear it. So if, you know, I'm not sure if that was helpful, but you know, if you have some sort of issue that is being held up, you know, we have a regular adjudication process. It doesn't matter what type of claim you're on, where the examiner has to reach out to you and get more information and then issue a determination if necessary. There is a short video on our website, if you go to the frequently asked questions, about the adjudication process. It's just, I think it's 1.5 minutes. And it explains that we reach out to you, we reach out to other parties, we gather all the information to make a decision. So that's how that process works.
One final question and then a comment, because we'll be needing to wrap up soon. We're supposed to finish at 12:20. One question that I'm seeing often, and actually let me back up a little bit. I know a lot of people have been asking questions in the chat box. So I'm going to try to consolidate as many of the questions into one larger question as I can. And if we've missed your questions in the audience, don't worry, we will be taking all of these questions back and sending them over to Susan and also to Joe and try to get answers for all of you. So they will be included with the link to the recording. That way people can see the answers to their questions if they didn't get answered here. So don't worry if we haven't answered your question. We will be trying to make sure that they all get answered. One of the other common questions that we've received, people have filed some time ago, back in March, and then the minute they were eligible, since then they haven't heard anything back. So people are wondering is there a back pay due to them? Is that an option? Did they do everything? They're wondering if they did everything right, if the system wasn't ready at that time because it was new. How do UC and PUA work in that way?
So there's a couple things that could happen. First, I will say that yes, back pay is absolutely possible. Even now, if someone hasn't filed a claim yet and they should have, they can still open a claim at this point and be paid for all the weeks in the past when they were unemployed and otherwise eligible for the program. So if you have weeks that are being held up or the system prevented you from filing, you know, you will definitely be made whole and receive those weeks. And, you know, also that, come to think of it, the $600 payments, as I mentioned, they end with the week ending July 5th. but they're tied to the claim week. So even if we didn't pay someone till September, they're still going to receive their $600 payments for the weeks through July 25th. So that's tied to the actual claim week. So when it comes to now I forget, lost my train of thought. So the back weeks. So someone may have gotten, we had a lot of people get caught in this issue where when they first opened a claim, the system asked for your last day of work. You provided your last day of work and it automatically backdated your claim to that week, which I know sounds nice, but the problem is a lot of times people's last day of work was during a week when they work full-time. It was a Friday, and March 13th, I will never forget, Friday the 13th was when we we heard the announcements about the closures and the pandemic starting. So, during that week, March 13th was actually the last day of work for a lot of people, and their application was backdated to that week, which I believe the effective date, it's always a Sunday, I think that was 8th. So what happened was when they went to file their continuing claims, their weekly claims for benefits, they said, when asked about that week, that they were employed that week. So there were no benefits needed. But then the system shut them down and didn't let them file anything else. So this was a problem that we had our vendor, they still haven't quite fixed how the programming works, but we had them forcibly open all of those old weeks for people to file. About 2 weeks ago, we advertised it. You had to file based on your social security number. You were to go in and just file for the weeks they'd be available for you. So most individuals were taken care of that way. There were a lot of individuals who tried to fix the issue for themselves by using a link on the dashboard that asked for backdating, and that actually just made the situation worse because backdating is a whole separate thing. Again, our terms are just so confusing. We realize that we're trying to make it better. Back weeks and backdating, different. Backdating is asking for the effective date of your claim to be sometime in the past. And that's not what most people were looking for. They were just looking to file for weeks that the system didn't let them file for on a weekly basis. So for individuals who asked for backdating using that link, a lot of them are still hung up. A backdating request is something that a staff person needs to approve. So we're working with our vendor on mass approving as many of those as we can, but a lot of the backdating requests do have to be looked at individually based on what they're asking for. If someone's asking for backdating to mid-February, we want to talk to that person because, how did the pandemic affect you in February? That sort of a thing. So, that is also another potential problem. If you were able to file for a week and it cut you off from other weeks, a lot of it might have to do with the fact that you were working. So whenever someone does work for a full week and then the next week they're requesting benefits, the system looks to try to make you reopen your claim. So there's a whole concept in unemployment called full after partial. What it means is if you're requesting a full week of benefits after a week where you worked partially or even fully, it's an issue because the law tells us we have to find out from you now why it is you're asking for full unemployment when the previous week you were working. That's the most basic way to explain it. So in any case, that's how it's been a little choppy for a lot of people during the pandemic. If they've done some work, but they don't work every week and it's on and off, that could also possibly hold up a claim. So, for the person who posed the question, I would recommend this would be one that you would send to the representative's office for us to look at to make sure you might be in one of those situations or maybe something else is going on. It's hard to tell without looking at the claim, so it'll be easier to look at the claim.
Okay, so I'm going to make one more comment, and then I think we're going to start wrapping up. As I mentioned before, a lot of your questions, keep sending them via email or in the chat, and we'll make sure that our guests have the opportunity to address them. And we'll be also letting you know when we send out the recording through the link. So my one comment is that DHCC is a nonprofit organization, and our mission is equal access for deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind people within the greater hearing community. One of the comments that I got yesterday was related, it was from a deaf person who filed for unemployment compensation, and she was frustrated because she could tell that the interpreter was not fully understanding what she was trying to say, and that caused some problems for her in trying to file later. And I know your office partners with the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing, ODHH, to set up a process so that deaf and hard of hearing people have access to UC and PUA in order to make the filing process much easier. Are there any training efforts to help these examiners, call takers, to really understand the challenges and what they need to know to work with interpreters and deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind individuals?
We do have an annual mandatory training for all staff. And I'm not even sure if it's just unemployment staff or if it's all department staff. On individuals, it all is encompassed in our low English proficiency. I know you tend to think of that as like other language interpreting, but it all is kind of like an annual reminder on how that goes. There's nothing more in-depth than that, although I'll give the caveat, the individuals who do work on the video phone every week, they of course have a little bit more knowledge simply by being involved in it every week. So they probably have more experience than the rest of the staff who may not work with that video phone. We would certainly be open to having staff, especially those working with the video phone, receive any type of additional training if it's available. We never say no to training. Learning things is always good. So, that's certainly a possibility if there is something out there.
Okay, I think we're gonna get ready to wrap up here. Joe, Representative Hohenstein, I should say, if you'd like to join us again with your video. Susan, any last comments?
Nothing
any
other
last
than
thoughts before we close?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. And of course, we will answer any questions we didn't get to today. We'll be able to take a look at that and provide responses, and also take a look at any claims that we have to look at as a result of this to see what's happening on specific situations. So, thank you all for attending, and I'll turn it over to the representative. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Susan. You have been a trooper today, so thank you very much. And thanks again to Neil and DHCC for hosting this. And again, I think in the chat, I put my email. I know my staff, Tara Gontek, put her contact info as well. And if there is a way for us to be a bit of a clearinghouse so that we can help you to sort through some of how you're communicating back to UC, please use us. It'd be great if you're an actual constituent of mine, but the reality is that there's service to be provided, and we'll make sure that it's being provided.
And with that, again, thank you everybody for joining us today. Thank you our guests. Thank you Representative Hohenstein, Susan Dickinson from UC. We're really pleased to provide this opportunity for our interpreters. It's one of the most common questions that we've been getting from interpreters is how this can be addressed, and hopefully we'll share more knowledge and greater understanding. At the same time, the opportunity to educate Representative Hohenstein and Susan really about the unique challenges in our field. And so again, with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. We'll be sending out this recording and also the Q&A of things that we have not yet answered. That will probably be sent out by early next week. And then people can go ahead and ask questions about their specific claims. Again, thanks everybody for joining us today. I had a wonderful time. We're going to stop the recording at this point. And if folks want to have a happy hour, go at it. Feel free. But thanks once again.